Rain fell like blades from hell, tearing through the dark streets of Chicago, turning the pavement into a river of blood shimmering under flickering neon. A deafening explosion erupted from a damp alley, followed by the acrid smell of gunpowder and scorched flesh. Ragnar Blaze burst from the shadows, his towering frame like a spectre from hell. His right arm a grafted titanium flame blade. A gift from the CIA after a shattered mission glowed crimson in the storm. He had just crushed 2 guards, their bodies lying motionless in a spreading pool of red mud. But Ragnar's heart didn't stir. This was just the first flame in the nightmare he had thrown himself into. An inferno he knew would burn everything to the ground. It all exploded a few hours ago, when Ragnar received a call from an unknown number. The woman's voice on the other end trembled like an autumn leaf in a storm. Your ex-wife, Elena, was torn apart in her home. And Leora, your daughter. They've taken her. Ragnar gripped the phone so tightly the plastic shattered. Memories flooding back like acid, eating away at his soul. Elena, the woman he once loved enough to sell his life for, had left him after the disastrous Moscow mission 10 years ago. And Leora, the 8-year-old girl he had only seen in faded photographs from afar, was now a hostage in the hands of monsters. Who were they? Ragnar knew all too well. Kyle Vorath, the Russian mafia boss. A man who was once a close ally but betrayed him during a deal to smuggle chemical weapons. Vorath had framed Ragnar as a traitor, causing the CIA to disown him, forcing him to live like a ghost, haunting the shadows of Chicago. Ragnar didn't wait. He plunged into the rainy night, driving his old pickup truck, which roared like a beast, toward a warehouse district on the outskirts of the city, where an old intelligence contact had tipped him off that Vorath's men were plotting. The cold wind whipped his face through the cracked windshield, but the pain of his loss made him more alert than ever, like the titanium flame blade in his right arm, vibrating, ready to erupt. Why now? He asked himself, the memory of Vorath like an old wound bleeding anew. During the Moscow mission, Vorath had sold out their position to the enemy, leading to the brutal deaths of his teammates, men he considered brothers. Now, he was using Leora to lure him out, perhaps to settle an old score, or to cover up a much bigger plot, a shipment of chemical weapons large enough to turn America into a graveyard. The truck stopped 100 meters from the warehouse. Ragnar killed the headlights, melting into the darkness like a demon coming home. The warehouse was a cracked concrete building, its rusted iron doors creaking in the rain. Through infrared binoculars, he saw 4 of Vorath's goons, clad in glistening black leather, smoking and standing guard with savage smirks. One of them, a big guy with a face scarred like a map of hell, held an AK-47 and was laughing about the little girl. Ragnar's heart tightened as if bound in chains they were talking about Leora, the innocent child dragged into this vortex. He couldn't wait any longer. He crept closer, his steps as silent as a wildcat hunting in a storm. The first guard never had a chance to blink. Ragnar lunged from the shadows, his titanium arm swinging up, smashing into the man's throat. The sound of breaking bone cracked like thunder in the rain. The man collapsed into the mud without a sound, blood spraying out to mix with the rain. The second one spun around, pulling a gleaming dagger. But Ragnar was faster than the night. He dodged the sharp blade, smashed the man's jaw with his left elbow, then delivered a roundhouse kick to the chest that sent him flying back into the concrete wall, blood gushing from his mouth like a red fountain. The other 2 inside the warehouse heard the commotion and rushed out, pistols drawn, shouting in shrill Russian, "Who dares to trespass?" One fired a wild burst, the first bullet grazing Ragnar's shoulder, leaving a searing burn. But he didn't flinch, adrenaline surging like hellfire. He rolled to dodge the second volley, springing up like a steel coil, his titanium arm slamming down on the nearest man's gun. The weapon shattered, along with the sound of bones in the hand breaking like dry twigs. The other one kept firing, but Ragnar was already on him like a phantom, locking his throat in the grip of his cybernetic arm, squeezing with titanium strength. "Tell me, where is Leora?" he growled, his voice as low as thunder from hell. The henchman panicked, his face turning purple in the rain. "In Mexico, with the boss. Vorath wants you to go there, to end everything." Ragnar released his grip, letting him collapse like the other corpses, then searched the warehouse with demonic speed. On a rotten wooden table, he found an old laptop, its screen displaying a detailed map and an encrypted message. "Deliver the chemical weapons shipment to Mexico City. The hostage is the key to lure the prey." Ragnar's heart hammered like a war drum. Chemical weapons, Vorath's old plot was repeating itself. Not just for personal revenge, but to threaten America's security, to turn millions of lives to ash. He deftly copied the data onto a USB drive with his titanium hand, then detonated a homemade grenade. Flames erupted, engulfing the warehouse in a hellish roar. The rain continued to pour, partially dousing the flames, but Ragnar was already back in his truck, flooring the gas and tearing into the black night like a soul-reaping spectre. "Leora, Daddy's coming," he whispered, his voice lost in the sound of the rain, the pain burning like acid. But before disappearing completely, Ragnar stopped the truck at a grimy roadside bar, where the smell of cheap booze and cigarette smoke mingled in the air. He needed information from an old ally, a hacker named Jax, who used to be a CIA insider. Jax was sitting in a dark corner, his face pale as he saw Ragnar walk in, rainwater dripping from his titanium arm. "You're insane. Vorath has eyes and ears everywhere. He sent Drax Shadow, a killer as cold as death itself, to hunt you." Ragnar clenched his fist, the titanium flame blade vibrating. "Drax? The one who tore Elena apart?" Jax nodded, pushing a file across the table, a photo of Drax with a face as sharp as a scythe, cold black eyes, and the markings of a Russian syndicate. "He's at the Mexican border, waiting for you like a hungry wolf." Ragnar stood up, rage flooding him like molten lava. He pictured Leora, the innocent child dragged into this hell, and his heart felt like it was being ripped apart. Would she even recognize him as her father, or had Vorath already filled her head with poisonous lies? The question hung in the air like a blade to his throat, making the atmosphere even heavier. He stormed out into the rain, the truck roaring to life and speeding away, heading for the border. The hunt had just begun, and blood would flow like a river. But in that moment, Ragnar whispered a rare prayer. "God, if you can hear me, give me the strength to burn this darkness down." The fire inside him blazed, ready to incinerate anything in his path. Which area are you listening to this story from? And what time is it where you are right now? Leave a comment below so I know you are still healthy and fully focused on this story. My dear friend, we will continue right after this. Following the foul trail from the warehouse, Ragnar crossed into Mexico, smashing a checkpoint guarded by Vorath's monsters and rescuing a witness who revealed the whereabouts of his daughter. Leora Blaze. A car chase through the muddy desert under a hellish rain turned into a furious firefight. Ragnar was wounded and bleeding, but he tore them apart with his fire-spitting titanium blade. He realized Vorath was using Leora as bait to cover for a massive shipment of chemical weapons, unleashing a fury in him like a meteor tearing through the sky. The U.S. Create. Mexico border appeared through a downpour that fell like acid from hell, turning the arid desert into a sea of red-tinged mud under the dim glow of headlights. Ragnar Blaze drove the old truck he'd stolen from the Chicago warehouse, its engine roaring like a wounded beast as it cut through the thick sheet of rain. His right titanium arm wasn't trembling from the cold, but from the adrenaline surging like molten lava, ready to spew fire and incinerate everything in its path. Leora is in Mexico City, he muttered through clenched teeth, picturing the little girl's face from the old photos, her brown eyes heartbreakingly like Elena's, now shrouded by Vorath's darkness. To get there, he had to tear through the checkpoint, a death trap set by Kael Vorath's monsters, who had bribed the border patrol to hunt down any ghost who dared to cross. The truck screeched to a halt 100 meters from the station. Ragnar killed the headlights, blending into the desert darkness like a demon returning to the underworld. Through the rain-blurred windshield, he saw 3 fake guards in tattered uniforms, holding rifles and sweeping flashlights back and forth. One of them, a big guy with a beard as thick as animal fur, was checking the papers of another truck with a savage grin. They were Vorath's lackeys, paid to turn the border into a graveyard. Unable to wait, Ragnar slipped out of the truck. His drenched black leather jacket clung to his body, and his feet sank deep into the mud. But his steps were still as light as a phantom's. The rain pattered on his shoulders, carrying the smell of wet earth and death. But his rage made him more alert than ever. The first guard was oblivious as Ragnar approached from behind. His titanium arm locked around the man's throat, squeezing so hard the snap of bone echoed dryly through the rain. The man collapsed into a puddle of mud, his flashlight rolling away, its beam illuminating the streak of thinned, blood-red water. The second guard spun around, pulling a dagger that flashed in the rain, and roared in shrill Spanish, "You damn gringo! You're dead!" He charged like a wild animal, swinging the blade horizontally at Ragnar's neck. But Ragnar was faster than the night. He sidestepped with the fluid motion of an assassin, smashing his titanium elbow into the man's wrist. The crack of bone was like a dry twig snapping, and the knife flew off into the mud. The goon snarled and threw an uppercut, but Ragnar blocked it with his cybernetic arm, the clash of metal ringing out, then answered with a straight kick to the chest. The man flew backward into the barbed wire fence, blood spraying from his mouth to mix with the rain, his body convulsing like a fish out of water. The noise attracted the third man, who ran out from the guard tent with an assault rifle and fired a hurried burst, the explosions echoing louder than the thunder. Ragnar rolled away, desert mud splattering his face like fresh blood as bullets stitched into the earth, leaving small holes smoldering with white smoke. He sprang up like a steel coil, lunging low toward the gunman, his titanium arm swinging up in a powerful blow to the jaw. Teeth scattered into the rain, and the man collapsed with a final gurgle. But before he passed out, he managed to press the alarm button. A siren wailed like the cry of a damned soul, shattering the desert's silence and heralding the coming storm. Ragnar burst into the damp, musty guard tent, searching as fast as a whirlwind. On a rotten wooden table, he saw a tightly bound prisoner, a gaunt man, his face covered in bruises, his eyes wide with terror in the faint beam of the flashlight. "Who are you?" Ragnar asked, his voice a low thunder, using his titanium flame blade to slice through the ropes with precision, not even scratching the skin. The man gasped for air, his voice trembling. "I'm Marco, Vorath's former accountant. They took me because I know about the chemical gas he's shipping a large batch to Mexico City to sell to terrorists. Your daughter, Leora, is being held at the international school downtown, as bait to lure you in." Ragnar nodded, his heart clenching as if bound by iron chains. Marco was the key, a living witness to expose Vorath's hell. But time waited for no one. The roar of engines echoed from the distance. 2 black SUVs charged forward like desert beasts, their blinding headlights cutting through the rain like the Grim Reaper's scythe. About 6 henchmen jumped out, assault rifles and handguns at the ready, their faces covered by masks in the downpour. "Take him alive! Vorath wants his head," one of them yelled. firing the first volley. A bullet grazed Ragnar's ear, leaving a sting like acid. He dragged Marco toward the truck, bullets whizzing past their heads, mud spraying everywhere. Ragnar jumped into the driver's seat, started the roaring engine, and floored it. The truck shot through the checkpoint, smashing through the steel wire fence with a screech of twisting metal mixed with the crack of gunfire. The chase exploded into a desert hell. The two SUVs stuck close, their headlights glaring into the rearview mirror, turning Ragnar into a moving target in a sea of mud. The rain made the road as slick as spilled oil, turning the desert into a swampy inferno that swallowed everything. Ragnar swerved hard, dodging a burst of fire from the lead SUV. The truck tilting, nearly flipping over. Marco held his head, screaming over the howling wind. Drax's shadow is leading them. He's Vorath's devil. As cold-blooded as death itself, Ragnar gritted his teeth. The memory of Drax, the man who had torn Elena apart, flooding back like a cutting knife. He's about to taste hell. He turned, his titanium arm opening the window, and pulled out the handgun he'd taken from the guard, firing 2 precise shots. The first hit the SUV's tire, causing it to swerve and flip over in the mud. The second pierced the windshield, taking out the driver as the vehicle crashed into a thorny bush and burst into black smoke. But the second SUV stuck to them like a ghost. A man leaned out of the passenger seat, firing a sniper rifle repeatedly. Bullets hit the back of the truck, making it shake violently. Ragnar felt a warm trickle of blood from the old wound on his shoulder. But he didn't stop, turning sharply onto a narrow desert path where thorny bushes scraped against the truck's body with a piercing screech. "Hold on!" he yelled at Marco, who was curled up like a dry leaf. The SUV followed, but the muddy terrain slowed its wheels. Ragnar seized the opportunity, stopping the truck abruptly behind a large rock, jumping out to take cover as his titanium flame blade ignited with a bright red glow in the rain. 3 henchmen rushed out of the SUV, their guns pointed into the desert darkness, the rain blurring their sights. Ragnar waited, his heart beating with the calm rhythm of a death drum. As the first one approached, he shot out like a bolt of lightning, his titanium arm punching through the man's chest. The crack of breaking ribs echoed as blood sprayed like acid. The second man turned and swung a knife, the blade cutting sideways. But Ragnar dodged, delivering a high kick to his chin that sent him flying back into the mud, his throat crushed by a titanium elbow. The third man fired his gun in a panic, a bullet grazing Ragnar's thigh with a searing pain. But he roared and charged forward, locking the man's arm and twisting it back before slamming his head into the car door. The dry crack of a skull breaking echoed in the night. The last man, the driver, tried to run, but Ragnar threw a titanium knife that hit him in the leg, causing him to collapse. Screaming in the rain, Marco ran out from the truck, his face as pale as a corpse. "You saved me. But they'll send more monsters." Ragnar nodded, checking his wound, a deep gash on his thigh, blood soaking his black pants. He pulled the driver up, pressing the gun to his head. "Talk. Where is Drax's shadow?" The man smirked through his pain. "He's waiting in Mexico City. Vorath knows you'll come for the girl, and the shipment of chemical gas will greet you with death." Ragnar knocked him unconscious with a final titanium blow, then got in the truck with Marco. The truck sped into the rainy night, heading for Mexico City. But he knew the hunt had just begun. Drax was lurking like a reaper, and Leora was waiting in hell. Could he tear through the darkness before Vorath's poison consumed everything? The desert air was heavy. The acid rain still fell, a sign that more blood would flow like a river. Landing in a smog of death in Mexico City, Ragnar met an old ally in a hellish bar to dig up secrets about Vorath's demonic laboratory. He infiltrated the school like a devouring phantom, rescuing Leora in a storm of close combat with vicious bodyguards. But the girl saw him as a kidnapping demon, The escape through the neon-red city streets began. The internal pain from the betrayal in Russia tightening around his neck like a scythe, nearly making Ragnar collapse in a pool of his own blood. The neon lights flickered like severed veins over the chaotic streets of Mexico City, turning the night into a hellscape painted in the vibrant red of sin and thick exhaust fumes. Ragnar Blaze drove the truck through the crammed traffic. The rain had stopped, but the air was still heavy with the smell of spicy street food and the blare of car horns that sounded like the cries of lost souls. In the passenger seat, Marco sat hunched over, his face pale after the desert chase, his trembling hands wiping away a mix of sweat and dirt. "We have to hide." "Now," Marco whispered, his eyes frantically glancing at the rearview mirror. There was no sign of Drax's shadow or his monsters, but Ragnar knew they were lurking like phantoms in the neon glow. "Vorath has eyes and ears everywhere here. His chemical gas lab is deep beneath the city. And your daughter, Leora, she's the key to luring you into his trap." They parked in a dark alley next to a rundown bar with a sign for El Diablo that flickered red like fresh blood. Ragnar pulled Marco inside. The air was suffocating with the smell of cheap tequila and cigarette smoke mingled with human sweat, and the sound of mariachi music echoed like a curse. In the darkest corner, a middle-aged man with messy grey hair and a wrinkled shirt sat waiting with an empty glass. It was Reyes, an old ally from his CIA days, a former informant who had navigated the Mexican cartels. Reyes stood up, giving Ragnar an awkward hug, reeking of alcohol. "Amigo, you're still as hard to kill as a cockroach. I heard about Elena." "What a fucking hell!" Ragnar clenched his fist, his titanium arm vibrating as if ready to spit fire. "Save it. I need everything on Leora and Vorath the lab. The girl's location. Everything." They sat down at a rotten wooden table. Reyes poured a drink with a shaky hand, his voice lowered as if whispering to death himself. "Kael Vorath is using the girl as a hostage to hide his hell underground. He has a secret lab in the city center, producing a genetically modified chemical gas to sell to terrorists, enough to turn America into a living graveyard. Leora is being held at the international school in the wealthy district, which he uses as a perfect cover. His guards, led by Drax's shadow, watch it like hunting dogs. He wants to lure you here to finish the blood feud from Moscow, where he sold you out to become a kingpin." Ragnar listened, his heart tightening as if being torn by a scythe. The memories flooded back. 10 years ago, in Moscow, Vorath had betrayed him during a mission to gather intel on the gas, selling out his team for power and framing Ragnar as a mole. Now he was using Leora, his own flesh and blood, as a pawn in his hellish chess game. "I'll tear him apart," Ragnar said, his voice as cold as titanium steel. Reyes nodded, pushing a crumpled map across the table. "The school is in the elite district. Pickups are in black SUVs. But be careful, Drax is a monster, not a man." Ragnar didn't wait another second. He left the bar alone, walking through the crowded streets, the sharp smell of tacos stinging his nose and the sound of mariachi music echoing like an invitation from hell. The school appeared under the pale yellow streetlights, a modern building with a high fence and cameras that swept back and forth like demonic eyes. Ragnar hid behind a thorny bush, watching through binoculars. A black SUV pulled up, and 2 guards as large as bears stepped out, escorting a little girl with messy brown hair and big, round eyes full of sorrow. Leora. Ragnar's heart pounded like a war drum. She looked so much like Elena he almost choked. But that innocent gaze was now shrouded in darkness. "My daughter," he whispered, his killing intent surging like hellfire. He quickly disguised himself as a janitor, pulling a baseball cap down low and carrying a broom as he shuffled toward the school gate. "Let me clean the car," he said in broken Spanish, his low voice concealing the titanium blade. He was. The guard with the assault rifle his face scarred and lumpy. Growled, "Get lost. You old bastard." But Ragnar didn't stop. He threw the broom at the man's face like a lightning strike, making him startle and stumble. In that split second, his titanium arm swung up and smashed into the man's wrist. The rifle clattered to the ground with the distinct crack of breaking bone. The second guard drew a dagger and charged, the blade flashing under the red neon. "You die!" Ragnar sidestepped, delivering a high kick to the man's chin that sent him flying back into the fence. Blood spraying from his mouth like a fountain, Leora screamed in terror, turning and running back into the school. Her small feet rushing across the wet lawn, Ragnar gave chase, vaulting a fence like a ghost, his feet landing silently on the ground. The school was vast, its hallways dark and filled with the mixed scent of old books and fresh paint. He heard Leora's footsteps ahead, his heart pounding like thunder. "Don't be afraid." "I'm here," he whispered. But the little girl didn't hear. Darting into a dark, empty classroom, Ragnar pushed the door open to find Leora hiding behind a wooden desk, her eyes wide with terror. "Stay away. Who are you?" He held up his hands, his voice uncharacteristically gentle amidst his inner storm. "I'm your father, Leora. Vorath lied to you. He's not your dad." But Leora shook her head violently, throwing a book at him and screaming, "You're lying! My dad is Vorath! You're the monster who kidnapped me!" Her screams attracted more guards. 3 more burst in through the back door, pistols raised, their faces twisted under the red neon light filtering through the window. The fight exploded like an eruption from hell. The first man fired hastily, the bullet embedding itself in the wall behind Ragnar as dust flew like the smoke of death. He rolled, using a desk as a makeshift shield of splintered wood, then lunged forward like lightning, his titanium arm punching through the man's chest, ribs cracked, blood spraying across the blackboard. The second man swung a dagger in a wide arc, the blade whistling through the air. But Ragnar blocked it with his cybernetic arm, the screech of metal on metal echoing down the hall. He delivered a roundhouse kick to the man's knee, forcing him to his knees, then slammed his head into a wooden desk. The sound of his skull fracturing was dry and sharp. The third man fired his gun repeatedly, bullets grazing Ragnar's shoulder, hot blood seeping out. But he roared and leaped onto a desk, jumping down to lock the man's neck in a titanium grip, squeezing until his face turned purple and his eyes bulged like a dead fish. Leora stood frozen behind the desk, staring at Ragnar as if he were a monster from hell, her brown eyes filled with fear and suspicion. He turned back to her, holding out a trembling hand. "You have to believe me. Vorath killed your mother. He's using you to lure me out." But Leora just shook her head, tears streaming down her face. You're a demon." Police sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had raised the alarm. The red neon outside the window, blinking like a dying heartbeat. Ragnar grabbed Leora's hand, gently but firmly, and pulled her toward the back door. "Run with me, or we're both going to die." They plunged into the Mexico City night, leaving the chaotic school and the bodies of the guards behind. A truck was waiting in a nearby alley. Ragnar pushed Leora into the passenger seat, started the roaring engine, and sped through the glowing red neon streets. The girl struggled, punching his arm. "Let me go. You'll regret this." But Ragnar locked the doors, his eyes focused on the crowded street, the wound in his shoulder burning like fire. "You need to listen. Vorath is not your father. He's a devil from Russia, and I'm going to burn him to the ground." Leora fell silent, her mind torn by doubt. But the silver ring glinting in Ragnar's pocket, Elena's memento, was a silent reminder. Behind them, the headlights of an SUV flared. Drax's shadow was in pursuit, the sound of his engine like the roar of death itself. The escape had only just begun. and the inner pain from the betrayal in Moscow tightened around Ragnar like chains. Would Leora believe him before hell swallowed them both? The red neon continued to flash, signaling that more blood would be spilled. The assassin Drax Shadow's SUV chased them through a hellish night market, leading to a sweaty hand-to-hand martial arts duel amidst scattered fruit and the smoke of burnt meat. Leora Blaze's faith began to waver as she watched her father tear his enemies apart like a wild beast. But an old wound burst open, nearly drowning Ragnar in a sea of his own blood. They hid in a dark warehouse, where Ragnar told her about the silver ring of memory. As the Lord said, "The light will scatter the darkness, our memories will burn away our chains." Blinding headlights from behind ripped through the Mexico City night like the Grim Reaper's scythe, flooding the rearview mirror of the old truck and turning Ragnar Blaze into a moving target in the chaotic traffic. He gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white, his titanium arm vibrating with the surge of adrenaline, while Leora huddled in the passenger seat, her brown eyes wide with a mixture of fear and suspicion, her small hands clutching the cracked leather seat. Behind them, Drax Shadow's glossy black SUV shot forward like a predator, its roaring engine drowning out the blare of horns and the salsa music spilling from the roadside bars. "Hold on!" Ragnar yelled, his voice a low thunderclap, as he floored the gas pedal, causing the truck to swerve through a crowded intersection, nearly slamming into a bus filled with screaming passengers. Leora screamed, covering her face with her hands. "Stop! Who? Who are you? Really? Why are they chasing us?" Ragnar didn't answer right away. His sharp eyes focused on dodging the first volley of bullets from the SUV. The deafening shots rang out, bullets tearing through the hot air and hitting the truck's rear tire, making it shake violently as if it were about to fall apart. He yanked the wheel hard, turning sharply into a narrow street packed with night stalls, the spicy smell of grilled meat and thick charcoal smoke mixing with the shouts from the crowd. A flashback hit him like acid. 10 years ago in Moscow, Kael Vorath had betrayed him during a nerve gas mission, selling out his comrades to climb the ladder of power and framing Ragnar as a traitor. Now he was using Leora, his own flesh and blood, as bait to lure him into hell, to cover up a shipment of chemicals powerful enough to turn America to ash. "He is not your father," Ragnar said, his voice steady against the wind whistling through the shattered window. "Vorath is using you to lure me in, to hide his deadly plot that nerve gas will kill millions of innocent people." The SUV stayed on them like a phantom. The driver, a bald, muscular man with a Russian dragon tattoo on his neck, yelled into his radio, "Shoot the tires! Take the girl alive!" Drax Shadow sat in the passenger seat, his angular face as cold as granite, as he precisely aimed a sniper rifle. The bullet hit the truck's right side mirror, sending shattered glass spraying across Leora's face and making her scream in pain. Ragnar spun around in a flash, his titanium arm smashing open the window. He pulled out the pistol he'd taken from the school and fired back twice through the howling wind. The first bullet hit the SUV's tire, causing it to swerve and nearly flip on the slick asphalt. The second pierced the windshield, embedding itself in the driver's shoulder, as blood sprayed out under the neon lights. The SUV lost control, slamming into a bent lamppost, thick black smoke billowing out with the screech of twisted metal. But hell wasn't over. A high-performance motorcycle shot out of a dark alley like an apparition. Drax Shadow leaped onto the seat, his glossy black leather jacket gleaming under the bright red neon, a pistol in his hand ready to tear them apart. Ragnar muttered a curse. Tenacious as a demon, he stopped the truck abruptly in front of a bustling night market, pulling Leora from the cabin and into the dense crowd. "Run! Follow me," he shouted, leading her as they weaved through the sea of people, the throat-burning smell of tacos and the relentless beat of salsa music pounding like the rhythm of death. Drax ditched the motorcycle and gave chase like a hunting wolf, a dagger glinting in his right hand, his dark eyes scanning the crowd like hell's own radar. They hid behind a piled-high fruit stand, golden oranges and fresh green limes scattering at their feet. The air heavy with the scent of ripe fruit and grilled meat. Leora panted, pressing close to Ragnar. Why? Why do they want to kill me? He looked at his daughter, his gaze softening for a moment amidst the internal storm. Because I know Vorath's secret. He's making a nerve gas that kills indiscriminately, selling it to the highest bidder. You're the key to silencing me, but I will not let him touch you. Suddenly, Drax's shadow appeared before them as if he'd climbed out of hell itself. His dagger striking for Ragnar's chest with lightning speed. He reacted on instinct. His titanium arm blocking the blade, the shriek of metal on metal echoed, drowning out the salsa music. As sparks of titanium glowed red, Ragnar threw a kick into Drax's stomach, sending him staggering back a few steps. The fruit stand crashed to the ground, oranges and limes scattering like slow-motion bombs. The night market crowd panicked, screaming and fleeing in all directions. The stampede of feet mixing with the sound of rolling fruit, turning the market into a chaotic battlefield. Drax sprang up as fast as a phantom, a smirk revealing a set of perfectly white teeth. You're finished. Blaze. Vorath is going to use the girl for his first experiment. He unleashed a continuous chain of martial arts attacks, an uppercut aimed at the jaw, a high sweeping kick, a python-like arm lock, so fast the air whistled. Ragnar dodged the first punch and countered with a titanium fist to Drax's chest, sending him flying backward into a meat stall, blood spraying from his mouth and mixing with the smoke of burning charcoal. The hand-to-hand battle erupted in the middle of the hellish night market, the smell of grilled meat mingling with the thick stench of blood. Drax stabbed repeatedly with his knife, the blade grazing Ragnar's shoulder and tearing open an old wound from the desert. Hot blood gushed out, staining his leather jacket red. He roared in pain, activating the titanium flame blade from his arm, slashing horizontally and leaving a deep gash across Drax's jacket, the torn fabric revealing bleeding flesh beneath. He dodged the second slash and delivered a roundhouse kick to Ragnar's thigh, causing him to stagger from a jolt of pain that felt like burning acid. Flashbacks mingled with the fight. In Moscow, Drax was Vorath's top henchman. He had been the one to cut Elena down as she tried to escape with Leora. His blade stained red with his wife's blood. You killed my wife, Ragnar growled, lunging forward like a wild animal, locking his titanium arm around Drax's neck and squeezing until his face turned purple. Drax escaped with a snake-like twist and plunged his knife into Ragnar's side. The blade sank deep into his flesh, blood spraying like a fountain, the pain spreading like hellfire. But Ragnar fought through it, throwing one last titanium punch into Drax's jaw, sending him flying backward into a pile of trash cans. His head hit the metal with a dull, dry thud, knocking him out cold in a pile of stinking garbage. Look out. Dad! Leora screamed from behind the fruit stand. One of Vorath's henchmen from the SUV rushed forward, firing an assault rifle into the thinning crowd. Ragnar pushed Leora down behind a pile of oranges, rolling to avoid the spray of bullets that chewed into the stall, fruit bursting in a spray of juice and blood. He sprang up, delivering a kick to the henchman's face that sent him crashing to the ground with a shattered jaw. The crowd was gone, leaving behind a devastated night market where fires from an overturned grill were beginning to spread, black smoke swallowing the red neon. Ragnar checked his wounds. Blood was pouring from his side and shoulder, the pain like being burned alive, his vision blurring from blood loss. He pulled Leora into a nearby dark alley, hiding in an abandoned warehouse filled with dust and the smell of old chemicals. I'll explain everything, he panted, slumping against a cracked concrete wall, pressing his hand hard against the wound to stop the bleeding. Leora looked at him, both terrified and curious, her brown eyes glistening in the moonlight that streamed through a crack in the door. You You really saved me, but Vorath said you were the bad guy. Ragnar pulled a worn silver ring from his pocket. The faint letters E and L etched on its surface in the dim light Elena's keepsake. He handed it to his daughter, his voice raspy. Your mother wore this on our wedding day. She never abandoned you. Leora, as the Lord says, the light will drive out the darkness. This memory will burn away the chains of Vorath's lies. Leora took the ring, her hand trembling, tears streaking down her filthy cheeks. She was silent, her heart torn. But the roar of an engine echoed outside the warehouse. Drax wasn't dead, and his men were closing in. Ragnar stood up, his titan arm glowing a menacing red in the darkness, ready to fight again despite his exhaustion. They had to run deeper into the Mexico City night before dawn, where the chaotic terrain could turn the tables. Would Leora's fragile trust be enough to keep her from betrayal? Or would doubt lead to a fatal mistake in a sea of blood? The air in the warehouse was heavy, the fires from the night market still burning in the distance. A sign that hell was just getting started, surrounded by bloodthirsty mercenaries. Ragnar and Leora fled deep into the Mexican jungle, where he slaughtered them in a brutal close-quarters battle, his titanium flame blade flashing like the Grim Reaper's scythe harvesting souls. For the first time, Leora called out, "Father," creating a moment of humanity amidst the flesh-tearing pain. But Drax's shadow ambushed them, forcing them to buy time in the damp, corpse-ridden darkness, revealing a plot to release a poison in America. Ragnar whispered, "The Lord teaches. I am the shield for the weak. We're going to tear this hell apart." The smell of smoke from the night market still clung to Ragnar's clothes like a curse, mingling with the thick, metallic scent of blood in the abandoned warehouse, where the darkness swallowed every sound except for their pounding hearts. Ragnar Blaze leaned against a cracked concrete wall, his breathing as heavy as wind tearing through a ravine. Blood from wounds on his hip and shoulder soaked his black leather jacket, dripping onto the cement floor in spreading red pools under the moonlight. His titan arm trembled slightly, not from exhaustion, but from a pain that radiated like hellfire, searing every muscle fiber. Leora sat huddled a few feet away, her brown eyes wide with a mixture of fear and anger, clutching Elena's silver ring like a talisman in the middle of hell. The engines outside had gone silent, but the air remained as heavy as a toxic fog. Vorath's men were circling, waiting for the right moment to tear them apart like predators. "Listen to me, Leora," Ragnar said, his voice raspy but as firm as steel forged in hell. He pulled a pistol with its last 2 bullets from his belt. "They're here. I'll clear a path. You run deep into the jungle and don't look back." Leora shook her head violently, tears streaking down her dirty cheeks. "No, I don't want to leave you. If you're my father, why didn't you tell me everything?" Vorath said, "You abandoned my mother." Ragnar looked at his daughter, the internal anguish tearing him apart more than any knife wound. 10 years wandering in the shadows. He'd lost the right to be a father. But he wouldn't let this hell take her from him again. 10 years ago, in Moscow. Vorath and I were allies. I worked for the CIA. He was an internal source. But he sold me out during a chemical weapons mission, killed my team, framed me as a traitor. Elena tried to get you to safety. But Drax's shadow, he stopped, his throat tightening as if he'd swallowed acid. He ripped your mother to shreds. I was captured, tortured. I escaped and spent 10 years looking for you. Vorath is using you to manipulate things, to hide his hellish lab here in Mexico City. The poison is meant to be released in the U, is a bited breast, killing millions of innocent people. Leora fell silent, the silver ring glinting in her small palm, like a piece of a memory obscured by lies. Why? Why did you only come now? She whispered, her voice lost in the darkness. Ragnar gave a sad smile, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. Because I was afraid. Daughter, afraid you'd end up like your mother dead because of me. But the Lord teaches. I am the shield for the weak, and now I will be your shield. At that moment, the clang of metal echoed outside the door. The mercenaries had arrived. 6 of them, clad in glossy black gear, their faces hidden by masks like demons from the Russian hells. Assault rifles and daggers gleaming in the humid jungle rain. The warehouse door burst open as if struck by lightning, and the monsters charged in with guttural roars in Russian. Take the girl alive! Vorath wants Blaze's soul, Leora screamed, pressing herself against Ragnar, her small hands trembling. He shot to his feet, his titan arm deploying its hidden flame blade, the brilliant red light flashing in the darkness like the Reaper's scythe ready to harvest souls. The close-quarters battle erupted instantly, the warehouse's cramped space turning into a bloody slaughterhouse. The first man lunged like a wild beast, slashing a dagger at Ragnar's chest. He dodged right with phantom speed, using his left elbow to shatter the man's throat. A dry, sickening snap of bone echoed as blood gushed from his mouth, mixing with the smell of old chemicals. The man collapsed, convulsing like a fish out of water. The second man fired his rifle at close range. The bullet slammed into the wall behind Ragnar, kicking up dust like smoke from hell. He rolled low, lunging forward like a lightning strike, and delivered a kick that shattered the man's kneecap. Then he plunged the Titan flame blade into his thigh. Blood sprayed like acid as the soldier screamed and fell, clutching his mangled leg. The remaining 3 surrounded him from 3 sides. One swung an iron pipe at Ragnar's head with the force of a sledgehammer. He blocked it with his titan arm. The shriek of metal on metal rang out as the pipe shattered into pieces. Ragnar countered with a straight punch from his titan arm into the man's skull. It caved in with a sickening crunch, and he dropped to the floor, eyes rolling back in his head. Leora hid behind a rotten wooden crate, her hand clamped over her mouth to stifle her screams, her eyes witnessing the hell her father was creating. The fourth man snuck up from behind, plunging a dagger into Ragnar's back. The blade sank deep into old flesh, and a sharp pain burned through him. He spun around with a roar, locking the man's wrist with his titan arm and snapping it backward with the sound of a dry twig breaking. The knife clattered to the floor. A knee to the stomach made the man double over, vomiting blood, and Ragnar finished him by slamming his head against the wall. His skull cracked, smearing the concrete with a dark stain. The last man, built like a Russian bear, charged in like a whirlwind, throwing a furious combination of hooks from all angles. Ragnar dodged the first, but the second hit his wounded shoulder. Hot blood sprayed out, and he coughed up a mouthful of it. He roared, unleashing the full power of his titan arm, and punched clean through the man's armored chest with a crack of breaking ribs. The giant flew backward into a wall and collapsed. His chest caved in. The warehouse fell silent, filled only with the sound of Ragnar's ragged breathing and the thick smell of blood that spread like a toxic mist. He dropped to one knee, pressing a hand to the new wound in his back, blood flowing freely onto the floor. Leora ran to him, tears streaming down her face, and for the first time, she whispered, "Dad. Dad." Her voice was trembling but full of emotion, like the first ray of light breaking through the darkness. Ragnar smiled weakly, reaching up to touch her cheek, his bloody hand staining her skin. "I'm okay. Do you believe me now? We have to run deep into the jungle before Drax gets here." She nodded, hugging him tightly despite the reek of blood. That single moment of humanity was like a balm in this flesh-tearing hell. But a slow clap echoed from the doorway, as cold as the laughter of death itself. Drax's shadow stepped inside, his black leather coat stained with blood from the night market battle. His cold, dark eyes glinting in the shadows. How touching. Blaze. But this little game from hell isn't over yet. He drew 2 pistols, their barrels gleaming in the moonlight. Ragnar pushed Leora behind a wooden crate and got to his feet, his body trembling from blood loss. "You're going to die here." Shadow. Drax fired the bullet, whizzed past Ragnar's ear, and slammed into the wall, kicking up dust. He charged forward, but his strength was failing. He only managed to fire 1 shot, hitting Drax in the shoulder and making him stagger. "Run!" "Leora! Into the jungle!" Ragnar yelled, turning to face the demon. Drax laughed. "You die. Then I take the girl back to Vorath. He'll use her for the first test of the poison in America." They crashed into each other. But Ragnar knew he was weaker. He had to buy time for Leora to escape. The rustling of leaves outside the door told him she was running deep into the Mexican jungle. Her tears mixing with the night dew, Drax slammed a kick into Ragnar's chest, sending him sprawling onto the warehouse floor. Blood filled his mouth, his vision blurring as if shrouded in a poison mist. From the jungle's edge, Leora's voice cried out, "No, Dad!" But Ragnar gave her a look run. She vanished into the darkness of the dense forest, where the treacherous terrain could hide her. Drax pressed the gun to his head. "It's over." Blaze, but Ragnar gave a faint smile. His titan hand twitching slightly, the flame blade was still ready. He unleashed a surprise kick from the ground, hitting Drax's wrist and sending the gun flying. Drax roared and lunged with a hook. Ragnar rolled away, getting to his feet despite the searing pain. They grappled in the tight space, branches whipping at them from a broken window. Drax unleashed a flurry of martial arts, a high kick aimed at his head, a chokehold tightening like a viper's grip. Ragnar blocked with his titan arm, the impacts echoing, and answered with a punch to the chest that sent Drax staggering back. Spitting blood, the fight dragged on, their breathing as heavy as a coming storm. Ragnar was buying time, knowing Leora was getting further away. Drax stabbed wildly with a knife. The blade grazed Ragnar's thigh, drawing blood. But Ragnar activated his Titan flame blade and slashed across Drax's shoulder, leaving a deep gash. Drax threw a roundhouse kick that connected with Ragnar's hip, making him buckle. But he surged upward, locking Drax in a chokehold and slamming his head into the wall. A dull thud echoed, and Drax collapsed, momentarily unconscious. Ragnar gasped for air, checked his wounds, and then bolted into the jungle, following Leora's tracks. The smell of damp earth and rotting leaves filled the air. He found her hiding behind a thorn bush, trembling. "Dad." "Are they?" Ragnar pulled her into a hug, a feeling of warmth cutting through the pain. "I'm okay. We keep moving. Vorath has a base in the States, where he's hiding the last of the poison." They slipped deeper into the jungle, but Ragnar knew Drax wasn't dead, and that hell would follow them. Would Leora survive alone if he fell? Or would her newfound trust pull her back? The jungle darkness swallowed them, leaving only the sound of rustling leaves and the breath of death. After crossing the border into the U.S.'s bid, they stopped at a gas station on the outskirts of Los Angeles, where a pack of bounty hunters attacked like a swarm of demons, leading to a massive explosion and a relentless firefight with bullets raining down like acid. Leora Blaze fired a gun for the first time to save her father, her trust igniting like a shooting star. But Drax kidnapped her amidst the billowing black smoke. Ragnar stole a motorcycle and tore into the night, fueled by a fire of vengeance that burned his very soul. Model. The Mexican jungle swallowed them for 3 hellish days, with Ragnar Blaze and Leora hiding like ghosts amidst rotting leaves and poisonous mist, evading Vorath's hounds on thorny trails and through dried streams that stank of blood. Ragnar, his body bleeding from old wounds, held his daughter tight in a truck stolen from the corpse of a henchman, crossing the border under a moonless night. The roar of the engine blending with the scorching desert wind. "We're going back to the States," he whispered to Leora, the suspicion in her brown eyes now replaced by a fragile trust mixed with fear. "In Los Angeles. I'm going to end this nightmare. Vorath has his final base there, where he's hiding the poison gas he plans to release on the city." Leora nodded, her hand clutching a silver ring like a shield. But the darkness of the jungle still whispered a warning. Drax's shadow wasn't dead, and hell would follow them to the ends of the earth. They stopped at a gas station on the outskirts of Los Angeles as a pale yellow dawn broke, turning the desert into a shimmering sea of sand under the glaring California sun. The truck was out of fuel. Ragnar ordered Leora, "Stay in the truck. Lock the doors. I just need to get gas. 5 minutes. That's all." The desert air was heavy with the smell of asphalt and hot dust. The gas station was deserted under a flickering green neon sign. A few old trucks parked haphazardly like corpses in the wasteland. Ragnar stepped out, his titan arm hidden under a leather jacket, his eyes scanning the pumps and the small convenience store. His intuition flared like a tongue of fire. Warning of danger. Vorath doesn't give up that easily, he muttered, his hand trembling slightly from accumulated blood loss as he pumped gas into the tank. Suddenly, 4 sleek black jeeps charged in from the desert like a pack of demons from hell, swirling sand, swallowing the horizon as they surrounded the gas station with the screech of tires. 8 bounty hunters leaped out, clad in gleaming black armor, their scarred faces grimacing in the sun. Assault rifles and daggers held ready like scythes. "Blaze, Vorath's paying $1 million for your skull," one of them yelled. Firing a warning burst into the air in a greeting from hell. The bullets whizzed by, slamming into a gas pump and sending sparks flying. Leora shrank down in the truck, her heart hammering against her ribs as she watched through the windshield, her small hands trembling as she gripped the pistol Ragnar had left under the seat. Ragnar rolled behind a large fuel tank, bullets ricocheting off the metal with a deafening clang, the thick smell of gasoline spreading like an invitation to an explosion. The desert battle exploded like a meteor tearing through the sky. Ragnar dodged a second volley of bullets, then jumped up and slammed his titan arm into the fuel tank, sending it rolling toward the monsters to sow chaos. The tank tumbled over and over, crushing one bounty hunter with the sickening crack of breaking bone mixed with his screams. A man with a machine gun fired relentlessly from a jeep, bullets like acid rain tearing through the hot air. But Ragnar was already moving. He snatched a piece of broken glass from the store window and threw it at the man's wrist. The gun clattered to the ground, blood spraying crimson in the sun. He drew the pistol from his belt and fired 3 precise shots. The first took down a man hiding behind a jeep, his head exploding like a watermelon. The second hit the machine gunner in the shoulder, sending him collapsing to the ground. Screaming, the final bullet tore through a third man's chest, and his body convulsed before falling onto the hot sand. But the desert hell wasn't over. Drax's shadow appeared, bursting from the swirling dust on a high-performance motorcycle, his black leather jacket shimmering under the sun like dragon scales, 2 pistols in his hands blazing non-stop. "We meet again. Blaze, this time I'll tear you both apart." Drax's bullets flew like meteors, slamming into the body of the truck and shattering the windows. Leora screamed from inside the cabin. Ragnar used a fuel drum as a shield, bullets sparking against the metal as oil fumes billowed up. A henchman lunged from behind, stabbing a knife into his back. The blade sank deep, the pain searing like acid, but Ragnar spun, blocking with his titan arm, snapping the blade with a sharp crack. He then delivered a kick to the man's stomach that sent him flying into a second fuel drum. A small explosion erupted, and fire spread, swallowing the nearest jeep. Black smoke billowed up, obscuring the sun. the sound of popping tires mixing with the stench of burning flesh. Drax charged through the smoke and fire, unleashing his martial arts like a demon, an uppercut aimed at Ragnar's jaw, a high sweeping kick at his legs, a hand lock that tightened like a Russian serpent. Ragnar blocked the punch with his titan arm. The impact echoed across the desert, and countered with a kick to Drax's knee, making him stumble and drop to one leg. But Drax dodged, plunging a dagger into Ragnar's thigh. Blood gushed out, soaking the sand into a red puddle. "You're weak." "Blaze, the girl will be Vorath's." From the truck, Leora acted. She jumped out, her hands trembling as she held the pistol Ragnar had left, and pointed it at Drax. "Let my father go." Her voice was young but full of determination. The first bullet grazed his shoulder, causing Drax to whip around with a smirk. A brave little girl. He raised his pistol to aim at Leora, but Ragnar lunged forward like a meteor, slamming his titan fist into Drax's chest and sending him flying backward with the audible crack of breaking ribs. In the desert chaos, a goon grabbed Leora from behind by her hair, pressing a gun to her head. "Drop your weapon, Blaze, or I'll blow her brains out." Ragnar's hands clenched, the titan fire in his arm vibrating. As he was forced to throw his gun onto the hot sand, Drax rose from the black smoke, ordering his men to tie Ragnar up with coarse rope and throw him into a jeep. "Take the girl to Vorath in Los Angeles. He's waiting to finish this." Leora struggled, her eyes looking at her father in desperation, tears streaming down her dusty cheeks. "Dad!" Ragnar was beaten to the ground amidst the flames. He slammed his titan fist into the sand, creating a deep crack, blood dripping from his wounds like acid rain. But through his rage, he whispered a rare prayer. "God, if you are justice, grant me the strength of this meteor." The fire of vengeance burned hotter than ever. Drax and his henchmen sped off into the desert night in their jeeps, leaving Ragnar amidst the smoldering wreckage. He picked up an assault rifle from a dead bounty hunter, got on Drax's still warm motorcycle, and gunned the engine, tearing off after the trail of dust and smoke. Vorath's base in Los Angeles awaited, but a despair as heavy as the desert settled over him. Could he save Leora in time, before the poison gas was released on the city? Or would hell swallow them both? The desert darkness consumed everything, leaving only the roar of the engine and the fire incinerating Ragnar's soul. At the disguised lair in Los Angeles, Ragnar stormed the bar like a whirlwind, crushing the guards in a chaotic symphony of shattering liquor bottles and flamenco music that died amidst the sound of cracking bones. He confronted Drax in the hellish basement, saving Leora in the middle of a brutal knife fight where blood sprayed like a toxic fountain, only for Vorath to call and reveal a terrorist plot of genocidal scale. They escaped, and Ragnar whispered to his daughter, "The Lord said, justice will follow like a shadow, and we're going to burn this evil down." The blazing red neon of the La Sombra sign flickered over a bustling Los Angeles street, turning the California night into a hellish painting full of colorful sin, while the sound of flamenco music echoed from within like a Russian curse. Ragnar Blaze stopped his motorcycle 100 meters from the bar, killing the engine. The heavy silence that followed was broken only by drunken laughter and the smell of cigarette smoke mixed with cheap tequila. The wounds in his thigh and side from the desert were still bleeding, warm blood soaking through his torn jeans. But he gritted his teeth against the pain. His sharp eyes scanned the crowd coming and going. This was Kael Vorath's disguised lair, the place where he concealed the last link in his chemical weapons trafficking network. And Leora, his daughter, was being held in the basement. According to the intel from Marco before they parted ways at the desert border, this was now the only clue leading to this hell. Ragnar disguised himself as a wandering liquor dealer, pulling a baseball cap low to hide half of his war-scarred face, his black leather jacket concealing his titan arm under its worn fabric. He pushed open the door and stepped inside. The air was suffocating, thick with the heavy stench of alcohol, human sweat, and dense cigarette smoke. A flamenco guitar wailed from a small stage where dancers writhed like poisonous snakes. The bar was packed. But he immediately spotted 4 of Vorath's guards standing in the dark corners, their hands near the guns hidden in their jackets. One of them, a man with a lumpy, scarred face and a shaved head, scanned the crowd like a hound. Ragnar pretended to order a shot of tequila, but his ears were listening. A whisper from the iron door at the end of the hall. The kid's downstairs. Guard her well. Vorath wants her alive to lure Blaze. His heart clenched as if squeezed by iron chains. Leora was close, and all hell was about to break loose. Without waiting any longer, Ragnar staggered like a drunk man, shuffling toward the iron door. "Where's the bathroom?" "Fellas?" he asked in a slurred voice, hiding his killing intent. The guard at the door sneered, his hand on his gun. "Get lost." "Gringo." But before the man could draw his weapon, Ragnar moved like a hellish whirlwind. His titan arm shot out, punching the man square in the face. Blood sprayed from his shattered nose as he flew backward into the concrete wall with a dry thud. The second man raised an assault rifle from the corner of the bar, but Ragnar spun and kicked his wrist, breaking it. The gun clattered onto the booze-sticky wooden floor, the crack of bone drowning out the flamenco music. The noise drew the attention of everyone in the bar. The guitar stopped abruptly. Screams erupted, and 4 more soldiers rushed from the corners, drawing daggers and pistols amidst the panicking crowd. Ragnar vaulted over the bar, using it as a shield. Glasses shattered, flying like shards of hell, and spilled tequila created small pools of fire from stray cigarette butts. He snatched a broken bottle from the floor and threw it at the nearest man's face. The glass cut deep, and the man screamed, clutching his bloody eyes. Ragnar lunged out like a ghost, his titan arm punching straight through the second man's chest. The sound of ribs cracking echoed over the screams as blood sprayed, staining the shirt of a nearby dancer red. The third man fired his pistol hastily. The bullet grazed Ragnar's ear, leaving a searing burn, and blood trickled from the rim. But he leaned away from the second volley and activated the titan arm's fireblade, slashing sideways and severing the man's gun strap. A hook kick to the jaw sent the man down, broken teeth scattering among the spilled liquor and broken glass. The last man, as huge as a Russian bear, swung an iron pipe from behind the bar. Aiming for Ragnar's head with the force of a sledgehammer, he blocked it with his titan arm. The deafening clang of metal on metal rang out, and the pipe shattered into pieces. Then he drove a fist into the man's stomach, causing him to double over, wheezing and vomiting a mixture of alcohol and bile, before collapsing unconscious in a spreading puddle of booze. The crowd's screams turned to a stampede, the thundering of feet and shattering bottles creating a hellish chaos as the flamenco music cut out, leaving a deathly silence. Ragnar didn't stop. He ran for the iron door, kicking it open with a screech of protesting hinges. A dark staircase led down to a basement, the air thick with the smell of damp mold and toxic chemicals, the sign of the secret lab Vorath hid beneath Los Angeles. He drew the pistol he'd taken from a dead guard and descended, each step echoing like a death knell as the darkness swallowed him like a welcome from hell. At the bottom of the stairs, Leora was tied tightly to a rotting wooden chair, her mouth covered with grey duct tape, her brown eyes wide with terror under the weak red neon light. Next to her stood Drax's shadow, wiping a blood-stained dagger, a sinister smile revealing a set of perfectly white teeth. "Welcome to hell in Los Angeles. Blaze, you think you can save the girl? Vorath wants you to watch her die first." Ragnar tightened his grip on the gun, his voice a thunderous growl. "Let the girl go, Shadow, or I'll tear you to pieces." Drax laughed, his voice as cold as Russian steel. The boss's plan is bigger than you think. The poison gas isn't for sale, he's going to release it in the heart of Los Angeles, using the girl as a live experiment to test the lethal concentration. You betrayed him in Moscow. Now you'll pay with your family's blood. His words were like acid. This wasn't just revenge. Vorath was planning genocidal terrorism, to turn the city of angels into a toxic graveyard. Ragnar didn't wait. He fired 3 quick shots. Drax rolled aside, the bullet slamming into the concrete wall, kicking up a cloud of dust like smoke from hell. He lunged forward, his dagger slashing like a scythe. A brutal hand-to-hand fight erupted in the cramped basement. Drax unleashed a flurry of martial arts strikes, an uppercut aimed at Ragnar's jaw, a high leg sweep, an arm lock that tightened like a venomous snake, so fast the air hissed with the smell of chemicals. Ragnar blocked with his titanium arm, the deafening clang of metal echoing through the room, and countered with a kick to Drax's knee that sent him stumbling to one knee. But Drax was as fast as a phantom. Plunging his knife into Ragnar's shoulder, the blade sank deep, hot blood erupting and soaking his shirt, the pain spreading like a toxic fire. Leora struggled in her chair, trying to scream through the tape, her eyes filled with despair. Ragnar regained his composure, activating his titanium flame blade in a horizontal slash that forced Drax back, tearing through his clothes and leaving a deep, oozing gash. They grappled among rolling chemical drums, Drax locking Ragnar in a chokehold and slamming his head against the wall. Blood trickled from his forehead, mixing with sweat, blurring his vision. He broke free with a knee to the gut and threw a titanium-powered punch into Drax's chest, sending him flying into a vat of acid. The chemicals splashed, eating into his flesh as he screamed in agony. Drax's phone vibrated in the middle of the fight. The screen flashing, it was Vorath. Ragnar snatched it, and the man's voice echoed from the speaker like a demon from hell. Blaze, you've arrived. Good. The gas will be released at midnight. Los Angeles will be the first victim. Millions of souls for my empire. The girl will watch you die first. Ragnar roared. You'll burn in hell for this. Vorath. He just laughed. Try and stop me. Ragnar smashed the phone to pieces and ran to Leora, cutting her ropes with his sharp titanium blade and ripping off the tape. Go. Kid! Run! He pushed her towards the stairs. But Drax wasn't finished. He grabbed a gun and fired a shot that grazed Ragnar's arm, drawing more blood. He turned and charged, delivering one last titanium fist to Drax's face that slammed him into the wall, knocking him out cold with a shattered jaw. Leora stood frozen on the stairs, looking at her father as if he were a demon and a savior. Dad. Let's go. Her voice trembled but was full of trust, her heart having shifted since the desert. They ran up and burst through the fire exit behind the bar. Police sirens wailed in the distance, mixing with the screams from the crowd still inside. Ragnar pulled Leora onto a motorcycle and tore off into the Los Angeles night, fresh blood dripping from his wound onto the seat. Hold on tight, he commanded, the desert wind whipping their faces. Leora hugged him tightly, no longer struggling, but her mind was reeling with worry. Dad. The gas. What are we going to do? Ragnar whispered over the roaring engine, his voice firm. The Lord said, justice will follow like a shadow. We're going to burn his sins to the ground before midnight. Behind them, the headlights of a jeep flared. Vorath's men were on them like hounds. The genocidal plot still hung over the city like a bomb full of acid. And Drax would wake up with a hellish fury. They had to hide in the alleys of Los Angeles. But Leora's trust was now the flame lighting their way. The city's darkness swallowed them, signaling that more blood would flow like a river before dawn. Hiding in a Los Angeles alley that reeked of death, Leora, her doubt eating at her like acid, called Vorath. This led to an ambush by Drax and his men. appearing like demons from hell. A street fight erupted with a flurry of fists, kicks, and the crack of gunfire, ending with both of them being captured, tied up, and dragged to a chemical-soaked warehouse, with a look as sharp as a blade. Ragnar reassured his daughter, sparking hope in the abyss of bloodshed. Hiding in a dark, winding Los Angeles alley where the stench of rotting garbage and industrial waste was as thick as death's breath, Ragnar Blaze checked the wound on his titanium arm. The blood had dried into a dark, dull crust under the flickering yellow streetlights. His motorcycle was hidden behind a pile of reeking trash cans, its engine still hot from their hellish escape from the bar. Leora sat leaning against a graffiti-covered brick wall, her brown eyes wavering between nascent trust and a doubt that ate at her soul like acid. She clutched Elena's silver ring like a talisman in the urban darkness. The distant sound of police sirens faded, but the tension in the alley was as taut as a wire about to snap. Kael Vorath's men could descend at any moment, with the chemical gas hanging over the city like an acid bomb. "Dad, why do we have to keep running like this?" Leora whispered, her voice trembling with exhaustion as she hugged her knees, shivering in the cold California night. Ragnar looked at his daughter, the internal pain tearing him apart more than Drax's knife wound 10 years apart. And now this hell was forcing him to choose between justice and her life. Because Vorath isn't dead yet. Kid. He's hiding the last batch of poison gas in a warehouse on the outskirts, ready to drop it on Los Angeles at midnight. I have to tear him apart before this city becomes a cemetery. Leora fell silent, the silver ring glinting under the weak light like a reminder of her mother. But the doubt planted by Vorath's lies still gnawed at her. But what if you're the one who's lying? Vorath said you abandoned me. I have to call him, just to be sure. Before Ragnar could stop her, Leora shot to her feet and sprinted towards a public payphone at the end of the alley, her small figure vanishing into the hazy smog from the main road. Ragnar cursed under his breath, blood rushing to his head. He ran after her through the sparse crowd of late-night wanderers, but the cluttered alley slowed him down, the wound in his side screaming like burning acid. Leora picked up the receiver, her hand trembling as she dialed the number seared into her memory of lies. Vorath. Help me. Some psycho kidnapped me. He said you're a monster. Her voice echoed in the night, shrill and desperate. A siren's call to hell. Ragnar grabbed her arm just in time, yanking her from the phone booth. But it was too late. Blinding headlights swept through the alley like the Grim Reaper's scythe. A black SUV screeched to a halt, its tires kicking up gravel. Drax Shadow stepped out from the driver's side, his black leather jacket gleaming under the neon light, a pistol in each hand, that sinister grin revealing his white teeth. Found you. Blaze. Smart girl Vorath sends his regards from the Russian hell. He gave a signal, and 3 henchmen jumped out of the SUV, their faces covered by black masks like demons made flesh, their assault rifles aimed squarely at Ragnar and Leora, who were frozen in the middle of the alley. Leora shrank back, pressing against her father. I was wrong, Dad. But Ragnar didn't blame her. He just whispered, "Stay calm, kid. I'll make a path." Drax fired first. The bullet grazed Ragnar's shoulder, leaving a searing burn as blood began to seep through his shirt. He rolled behind a rusty dumpster, using it as a shield, and fired the last bullet from his pistol. It hit one of the henchmen in the leg, and the man dropped, screaming and clutching his bloody thigh. Ragnar burst out like a phantom, his titanium fist connecting with a second man's face, sending him flying into a vendor stall, which splintered apart in a spray of oranges, lemons, and fresh blood. The third man lunged from behind with a dagger, the blade flashing under the neon, but Ragnar blocked it with his titanium arm, The shriek of metal on metal echoed down the alley. He snapped the blade with a crack, then drove a kick into the man's chest that sent him crashing into a lamppost, slumping to the ground unconscious. His ribcage caved in. Drax didn't wait. Lunging in with a hellish series of martial arts attacks, an uppercut aimed at Ragnar's jaw, a high leg sweep, an arm lock that coiled like a Russian serpent, so fast the air in the alley whistled with the stench of garbage. Ragnar countered, blocking the punch with his titanium arm with a dull thud and kicking Drax in the knee, causing him to stumble onto the gravel. But Drax dodged the second kick and plunged his dagger into Ragnar's side. The blade sank deep into the old wound, and blood gushed out like a stream of acid, the pain making him roar like a wild animal. The street fight exploded in the dark alley, the sound of relentless blows drowning out the distant traffic. The red neon from a bar sign, painting the bloodshed in a hellish light. Drax threw a roundhouse kick that hit Ragnar's shoulder, making him stagger and almost fall into a puddle of sewage. But he recovered, locked Drax in a chokehold, and slammed his head against the graffiti-covered brick wall. Blood sprayed, and the sickening crack of his skull echoed through the alley. Leora screamed from behind the dumpster. "Stop! Don't kill my dad!" She picked up a piece of broken glass from a stall and threw it at Drax's back. But he dodged it easily, spinning around with a smirk. "A brave little girl. Vorath will reward you with the first taste of the poison gas." He advanced, pressing his pistol to Leora's head, the cold steel of the barrel touching her trembling forehead. Ragnar clenched his fists, the titan fire raging within him, forced to raise his hands in surrender amidst his boiling fury. "Don't. Let the girl go," Drax signaled, and two of his goons burst out of the SUV like demons, tying Ragnar's hands with a coarse rope that bit into his titan arm, then dragging him and tossing him into the back of the vehicle like a corpse. Leora struggled violently, but Drax grabbed her by the hair, dragging her across the gravel road and shoving her into the back seat. "The boss, Vorath, wants to see you both, your soul, and the girl's body." The vehicle sped off, leaving the chaotic alley behind with glittering shards of glass and a spreading pool of blood under the red neon glow. Speeding through the Los Angeles night in the SUV, Ragnar was bound tightly in the back seat. Blood seeped from his hip, staining the leather, but his eyes were as sharp as a titan blade. He looked at Leora, who was huddled beside him, giving her a reassuring glance, a silent promise in the middle of hell. "Don't be afraid. I'll get you out of here, even if I have to tear this whole city apart." Leora didn't answer, tears streaming down her face, but she clutched the silver ring, her feelings wavering from doubt to a fragile hope. Drax, in the front seat, turned to sneer at them through the rearview mirror. "You think you're a hero? Blaze? Vorath will tear you apart in front of the girl, then use her as the final bait for the poison gas. Los Angeles will remember tonight, millions of souls dissolving in acid." Ragnar remained silent, but in his heart, the memory of that human moment in the Mexican jungle flooded back when Leora had called him dad for the first time, like a light in the darkness. That trust was changing her, turning from a seed into a flame. The SUV screeched to a halt in front of an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Los Angeles. Dim lights illuminated barrels filled with toxic chemicals. The pungent smell of acid spread like the breath of hell. Ragnar was dragged from the vehicle, his hands still tied, blood dripping onto the cracked cement floor, forming spreading red stains. Leora was pulled inside, where the darkness swallowed everything except the heavy sound of footsteps. Drax kicked Ragnar in the back, forcing him to his knees. "On your knees, failed agent." Ragnar gritted his teeth, his titan arm trembling slightly. The ropes wouldn't hold for long. The blade of fire was ready to cut them. He needed the perfect moment to save his daughter. In the middle of this chemical hell, from a distance, the sound of slow footsteps echoed. A tall figure appeared under the weak neon light. Kael Vorath. His black suit immaculate, but his eyes as red as a Russian demon's. A cruel smile flashing. Blaze. "You're as persistent as a cockroach," Vorath said, his voice a low hiss from hell, as he stepped forward to gently stroke Leora's cheek, making the little girl flinch. "This girl is mine. You don't deserve to be a father. You're just a failed ghost from Moscow." Ragnar clenched his fist. The Titan flame blade flickered slightly beneath his bindings. "You killed Elena. You're using my daughter as bait to cover for your poison gas. I will burn your empire to the ground." Vorath laughed out loud, pulling a pistol and pressing it to Ragnar's forehead. "You want to save her? Good. But first, witness true hell." The final battle was approaching, and Ragnar knew that to save Leora, he would have to spill more blood. But his daughter's trust was now his most powerful weapon in this acid-filled abyss. The darkness of the warehouse swallowed them, leaving only the sound of frantic heartbeats and the chemical stench that signaled annihilation. Ragnar cut his bonds with his Titan arm, slaughtering Drax in a bloody close-quarters battle of flying bullets and splashing chemicals. Saving his daughter from a fiery hell, Vorath escaped like a ghost. But Leora's trust became the sharpest blade of all, driving Ragnar toward a climax of pure rage. Darkness enveloped the abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Los Angeles, where the pungent smell of acid from barrels full of poison gas mixed with the cold air like the breath of death, turning the space into a slaughterhouse from hell. Ragnar Blaze knelt on the cracked cement floor, his hands bound tightly with coarse rope that bit into his Titan arm until the flesh bled. Wounds on his hip and shoulder from the alley fight still dripped onto the floor, creating mottled red stains under the dim neon lights. In front of him, Leora was tied to a rotting wooden chair, her mouth covered with grey duct tape, her brown eyes wide with terror as tears streamed through the dirt on her face. Kael Vorath, the Russian mafia boss with an immaculate black suit, but eyes as red as a demon's, stood in the middle of the warehouse, a cruel smile flashing under the weak light. Beside him stood Drax's shadow, the cold-blooded assassin, wiping a dagger still stained with fresh blood from the alley fight, his cold black eyes sweeping over Ragnar like a scythe ready to reap. "Blaze, you really are a persistent ghost," Vorath said, his voice a low hiss from the Russian underworld. He walked closer to Leora, gently stroking her tangled hair, which made her flinch and shrink back. "But you came here to die. The girl is mine. I raised her. Gave her everything you couldn't." Ragnar gritted his teeth until they bled, his Titan arm trembling slightly under the ropes, the hidden flame blade ready to sever his chains. "You're the one who killed Elena. Vorath, you framed me in Moscow, and now you're using my daughter as bait for your poison gas. I'll tear you to pieces." Vorath laughed loudly, turning to Drax. Listen to him. A convict demanding justice from hell. He pulled a pistol from his waistband, pressing the cold barrel against Ragnar's forehead, the metal stinging his skin. 10 years ago, in Moscow, I hired Drax to grab Elena to keep her quiet. But he took it upon himself to tear her apart, ruin the plan. I loved her, but she wanted to take the girl away, so I had to act. Now, my poison gas will be released on Los Angeles, turning this city into a graveyard, millions of souls for my empire. Drax smirked, his voice hoarse. She was stubborn, just like you. Blaze, I was just following orders. Leora heard everything through the duct tape, her eyes wide with panic as tears streamed down her face. You killed my mother? She managed to whisper. Her voice choked. Vorath shook his head in a fake gesture of sympathy. No, my daughter. It was Drax. I am your father. Blaze is the traitor. Ragnar roared in fury. You're lying. You ordered all of it. Just so you could climb to your throne in hell. Vorath shrugged and motioned to Drax. Take the girl. I'll deal with Blaze first. Drax grabbed Leora's arm and pulled her from the chair. But she struggled violently, trying to scream through the tape. Ragnar seized the opportunity. The Titan flame blade ignited, severing the ropes in an instant with a dry snap of metal. He sprang up like a demon, uncoiled, landing a tangent-powered punch on the nearest goon's face, sending the man flying into a barrel of chemicals. Acid splashed out, eating away at his flesh as he screamed in agony. Drax spun around, drawing his pistol and firing shot after shot. Bullets whizzed past, embedding themselves in the concrete wall behind Ragnar, kicking up dust like smoke from hell. He rolled to dodge, using a rusty metal barrel as a shield as bullets ricocheted with a deafening clang of distorted metal. The three-way battle exploded like an erupting volcano. Drax rushed Ragnar with a series of bloodthirsty martial arts moves, an uppercut aimed at the jaw, a high, sweeping kick to the legs, an arm lock as tight as a Russian python, so fast the air whistled with the thick smell of acid. Ragnar blocked with his Titan arm, the sound of clashing metal echoing through the warehouse, and answered with a punch to Drax's chest that sent him staggering back a few steps. Ribs cracking and blood spurting from his mouth, but Vorath was firing from a distance. A bullet grazed Ragnar's ear, leaving a deep gash. Warm blood flowing freely. Enough, stop, or the girl dies in front of you. He pressed the gun to Leora's head, the barrel touching her trembling temple. Ragnar, panting heavily, dropped his hands amidst his boiling rage. The Titan flame blade retracting. Let her go. I surrender. Drax got to his feet, blood dripping from his lips, and smiled menacingly. You've lost. Blaze. Now, let's see the real game. Vorath pressed a button on a remote control. A massive conveyor belt rumbled to life, pulling Leora toward a set of acid-laced chemical grinding blades, the machinery growling like a ravenous beast. An old monitor on the wall flickered to life, a crimson countdown glowing. 10 seconds. Save her, if you're fast enough. Blaze. This is the price for Moscow. Leora screamed through the duct tape, her body being dragged across the cement floor, her eyes filled with desperation as she looked at her father. Ragnar lunged forward, but Drax blocked his path, landing a kick to his chest that knocked the wind out of him, sending him sprawling. 8 seconds left. Ragnar got up, his eyes bloodshot with fury. I'll send you to hell for this. He dodged a bullet from Vorath, his Titan arm slamming down on the man's wrist. The gun clattered far away. Drax rushed in, stabbing repeatedly with a dagger. The blade sank into Ragnar's shoulder, blood gushing out like a fountain. But he endured the pain and ignited the Titan flame blade, slashing it across Drax's arm. Drax roared and fell back, a bloody mess. 5 seconds left. Ragnar ran to the control panel, but it was locked with an iron chain. He used his Titan arm to snap the chain with a crack, but Vorath lunged from behind, punching him in his wounded hip, sending blood spraying. 3 seconds left. Leora was nearing the blades, acid dripping down and making the wooden chair sizzle and bubble. Ragnar leaped onto the conveyor belt, grabbing the chain, binding his daughter with his Titan hand and pulling. The metal shrieked and broke. He pushed Leora, sending her rolling to safety on the floor just as the grinder pulverized the chair into a shower of splinters and acid. The timer hit 0, and the deafening roar of the machine died down. Vorath bellowed in rage, grabbing his gun and firing. The bullet hit Ragnar in the thigh, and he collapsed, a sharp pain like burning acid searing through his flesh. Model. Drax seized the opportunity, lunging forward to lock Ragnar in a chokehold. Die. Blaze! But Leora acted from the floor. She snatched a metal shard from a broken chair, ran up, and slammed it into Drax's back, making him stagger and release his grip. Don't touch my dad. Her voice was childish but full of fire. Like the sharpest blade, Ragnar capitalized on the opening, unleashing a titanic punch into Drax's face. His jaw shattered. His body flew into a concrete wall, and he fell unconscious with blood pouring from his mouth. He spun around, charging at Vorath through a hail of bullets and acid splashing from ruptured barrels, and kicked him hard in the back, knocking him down. But Vorath scrambled back up, pulled out a dagger, and plunged it into Ragnar's hip. Blood sprayed, searing pain tearing through his flesh. Ragnar roared, grabbing Vorath's throat with his titan hand. It's over. You demon. Vorath smirked through the pain. You win. But my remnants will hunt you to your death. The gas will still be released. He squeezed. The crack of a breaking neck echoed as Vorath collapsed. Dead. His eyes rolled back like a soul from hell. The warehouse fell silent, leaving only the sound of ragged breaths and the thick stench of acid and blood. Ragnar knelt to hug Leora, his blood staining her shirt red. You're safe now. I'm so proud of you, she sobbed, holding him tight. Dad, I believed in you. Mum would be proud. Warmth filled his heart in the middle of this hell. But the wound was draining him, his vision blurring from blood loss. They had to leave before Drax woke up and his men arrived. The poison gas was still a threat, and Vorath's remnants would return like ghosts. Ragnar whispered to his daughter through the pain. God teaches. The truth will set you free. Your faith has set us free. They staggered out the back door, disappearing into the suburban Los Angeles night. But Ragnar knew the climax wasn't over. The abandoned factory awaited, where the final batch of poison gas was hidden. Could they destroy it before all hell broke loose? The darkness of the warehouse felt heavy. A premonition that more blood would be spilled like acid. He tore out Vorath's throat, destroying the cache of chemical weapons in a roaring inferno that sent plumes of black smoke billowing up to swallow the sky. But Drax escaped, leaving behind a hellish curse. The father and daughter sped off in a car toward the future. As Ragnar promised, I will forge you into a meteor of justice, an open ending haunted by the ghosts of the past, promising a new hell to come. The first light of dawn broke over the Los Angeles sky, its faint rays piercing the crumbling walls of the abandoned factory, turning the space into a battlefield stained with blood and hazy with acid dust that hung in the air like a fog from hell. Ragnar Blaze stood there, his black leather jacket soaked red with blood from wounds in his hip and shoulder, his titan arm glowing crimson despite being covered in scratches from the death warehouse. Leora stood beside him, her brown eyes now hardened by hellfire, her hand gripping the rusted iron bar she'd picked up from the warehouse floor like the blade of a vengeful goddess. Kyle Vorath, who seemed to have been choked to death in the warehouse, had escaped through a secret passage. Now he was hiding here. This old factory was his final stronghold, where a massive shipment of chemical gas was stored, ready to be transported and released over the city of angels. And Drax's shadow, the assassin, as persistent as a ghost, had awoken from the Titan's blow, his figure lurking in the darkness with a shoulder wound still seeping blood. Stay behind these machines, Ragnar whispered to Leora, pushing her behind a heap of rusted metal and frayed wires that smelled of old machine oil and toxic chemicals. He clenched his titan fist, the blade of fire igniting with a flash, like a meteor ready to pierce through hell itself. I'm going to end this nightmare. The wind whistling through the factory's gaps carried the pungent smell of acid and burnt metal, as the dawn light glinted off barrels of poison gas that looked like bombs waiting to detonate. Vorath stepped out from the shadows behind an old press machine, his black suit tattered from the warehouse fight. A pistol held steady in his hand, his eyes bloodshot with rage. Blaze. You followed me all the way here? I thought you were dead. Now I'll finish it. Release the gas at dawn, and Los Angeles will be the first tomb of my empire. Beside him, Drax's shadow staggered into view. Dried blood caked on his face from his broken jaw, a dagger gleaming in his hand. Let me tear him apart first. Boss, the little girl will watch. Ragnar didn't answer. Lunging forward like a meteor from hell, his titan arm swinging up to block Drax's first punch, the clang of metal on metal echoed, drowning out the whistling of the morning wind. Drax threw a high kick aimed at his chest, but Ragnar dodged aside and countered with a titan punch to his shoulder. The old wound burst open, spraying crimson blood in the faint sunlight as Drax fell back with a pained growl. Vorath fired from a distance, a bullet grazing Ragnar's thigh and leaving a deep gash, his blood soaking the hot, sandy factory floor. D. You traitor! But Ragnar didn't slow down, springing up like a steel coil, locking Drax in a chokehold and smashing his head against a rusted iron pillar. A dry crack echoed as blood from Drax's forehead splattered into the acid dust. Drax broke free. Stabbing wildly, the blade plunged into Ragnar's shoulder, a sharp pain spreading like toxic fire. But he ignited his titan blade and slashed across Drax's arm, sending blood spraying like a fountain of flesh-eating acid. A brutal three-way battle erupted amidst the hellish dawn, the abandoned factory turning into a slaughterhouse filled with the sounds of relentless punches, kicks, and echoing gunshots. Vorath charged in to help, swinging an iron bar at Ragnar's head with the force of a Russian sledgehammer. He blocked it with his titan arm. The bar shattered into pieces with a sharp crack of metal, then threw a kick into Vorath's gut, sending him tumbling into a stack of chemical barrels. Acid shot out, sending up a thick smoke that corroded his black suit. Leora screamed from her hiding spot. Dad. Watch out! There are too many of them. She was witnessing hell, but the fire of faith ignited in the warehouse had turned her into a little warrior. She gripped the iron bar tighter. Drax seized the opportunity, unleashing a martial arts combo, an uppercut to Ragnar's chest that made him cough up blood, followed by a sweeping kick that nearly took him off his feet. A flashback hit him in the middle of the fight. 10 years of suffering from Moscow, losing Elena, being separated from Leora, all because of Vorath and Drax. You took everything from me, Ragnar growled, igniting his titan blade and slashing it across Drax's arm, sending a red stream spraying in the dawn light. Vorath got up from the acid spill, grabbed his gun, and fired repeatedly. Bullets flew like a meteor shower, embedding themselves in the machinery near Ragnar, creating a deafening clang amidst black smoke. He rolled to avoid them, using a pile of scrap metal as a shield as bullets ricocheted with a high-pitched scream. Ragnar charged at Vorath, driving his titan fist into his chest. The crack of ribs breaking rang out as Vorath flew backward into an old control panel, accidentally activating a chemical grinder, which roared to life. The machine's growl began to drag Vorath towards its churning acid-laced blades as he screamed, trying to hold on. Save me. Drax, don't let me die like this. But Drax was busy fighting Ragnar and couldn't get there in time. He landed a kick to Ragnar's knee, causing him to stagger in pain. Leora acted from the shadows. She darted out with her iron bar and slammed it into Drax's back, making him stumble and turn. Don't touch my dad. Her voice was young but as fierce as a goddess of vengeance, and the iron bar swung up and hit his shoulder with a crack. Ragnar seized the moment, throwing one last titan punch at Drax's face. His jaw shattered again as his body flew into a concrete wall, his head slamming hard, knocking him unconscious, with blood pouring from his mouth. He turned back to the conveyor belt, pulling Vorath away from the blades just as dripping acid began to eat away at his screaming hand. But Vorath pulled out a final dagger and plunged it into Ragnar's hip. Blood sprayed out, the pain tearing through his flesh like hellfire. Ragnar roared, grabbing Vorath's throat with his titan hand in the morning light. The grudge from Moscow ends here. You demon! Vorath gave a weak laugh, his eyes bloodshot. You win. But Drax will hunt you. The gas will still. Ragnar squeezed. The final snap of a breaking neck echoed as Vorath collapsed, his body twitching on the floor of bubbling acid. The factory fell silent, leaving only the sound of heavy breathing and the spread of acid smoke. Ragnar fell to his knees, his vision blurring from blood loss. But he managed to activate the self-destruct system from the control panel. Flames erupted from the gas barrels, consuming the chemical shipment in a massive inferno, sending black smoke billowing into the dawn sky like a hellish curse. Leora ran to him, hugging her father and crying, "Dad, we won. The gas. It's gone." Ragnar smiled weakly, holding his daughter even as his blood stained her shirt red. "You were so brave, Leora. Now I'm going to train you, turn you into a meteor of justice, to fight the shadows that remain." But Drax was stirring in the rubble, staggering to his feet and escaping into the desert with a shrill curse. "I'll be back. Blaze. Hell isn't over yet." Ragnar knew he wasn't dead, and the remnants of Vorath's gang would be lurking like ghosts from the past. The father and daughter left the factory, stepping out into the light of the California dawn, where the golden sun burned away the acid mist. Ragnar helped Leora into a truck he'd stolen from Vorath's men, slammed on the gas, and sped down the empty suburban Los Angeles road, heading toward the free horizon. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice hoarse but full of hope. Leora nodded, clutching her silver ring tightly. "Ready, Dad. We'll burn every shadow." The truck flew down the highway, the desert wind whipping their faces. But in his heart, Ragnar knew his journey for justice wasn't over. It had just begun. The ghost of Drax lingered behind them, promising a new hell to come. But now, he and his daughter were an indestructible meteor, ready to pierce through the eternal darkness.